Okay, we have two people here. Hi, you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer till we start officially. Wow, I'm seeing so many familiar faces, unfamiliar faces, familiar Instagram handles. Hi guys. I think I'm gonna wait about 3 minutes more before I start, just so that we have more people. Hello, Tracy. Right. Hi, Shahara. Okay, well, it's exactly 6:30, so let's wait a couple more minutes, perhaps. My gosh, so many familiar people joining in. Right. Hi, Tehani. Right. Okay, we have 11 people. I don't know if I should start, if I should wait. Let's wait. Better to wait. We can reach a larger audience, isn't it? The madam herself is here. Hi, Azara. I don't know if I'm doing this right, Azara. Right. Yes, let's wait. Let's wait for a few more minutes. Hi, Josh. All right, so I think we should start. I mean, we've got 14 people here. That's about the size of an average class for me. So, you know, that number of people I can talk to. All right, so today I'm here with ARTRA to talk to you about my experience as an educator as well as a performer. And I want to talk to you about reading a text versus performing a text, and how different that is. Obviously, most of us know that, you know, reading a text and performing a text is two completely different things. But I want to talk about how we can approach a text, or how you can approach a text, because obviously you, as a actor or even a student, you would you would engage with these texts in completely different ways, right? So my goal today is to suggest the possibility that these are two different things, and perhaps also suggest the possibility that as we kind of go ahead, you know, in this now new digital world that we're into, that we consider the possibility of marrying these two things. We consider the possibility of reading and studying a text. I have my very weathered copy of Othello here. Reading and studying a text and performing a text. We marry these two activities. So when I say text, I mean anything. I mean a play, a poem, a monologue, mime, musical theater. Any of these texts are texts that we perform conventionally, right? Of course, there are multitudes of texts that we perform unconventionally, but I'm not going to go there. Let's just stick to the conventional today. So just to give you a little bit of background, as ARTRA has also so kindly kind of stated, my journey as a actor began with the Inter-School Shakespeare Drama Competition, right? So my first introduction to kind of the text or a script or a play was through my literature lesson in school, and I had a fantastic literature teacher who inspired me to become a teacher today. So anyway, I realized quite young that what I was being taught in school and what I would learn from a director, now both people being my mentors, both of these mentors was completely different, and this difference was staggering, right? So the Shakespeare Drama Competition, the All Ireland Shakespeare Drama Competition, is where I kind of was exposed to this, and the difference was staggering, and I struggled to come to terms with it. So as a teacher today, I'm sorry if you catch me looking here, it's because I've got notes on my computer screen, and so I'm going to look at them just to make sure that you have a nice structured kind of session with me today, because you know, structure is important. Anyway, coming back to my topic, right? As a teacher, I make an effort to make sure that my students are more aware of the performative element of a conventional script. And I've learned that if you are studying a script, you must always study the script from the point of view of an audience. So this means that you take into account an audience's perspective. So that obviously implies that you take into account the fact that this text is going to be produced and is going to be performed in front of you, right? So I find that examples are really a great way to get people thinking. So let's start with an example. Let's take Shakespeare, okay? So most of the people in my generation, the older generation, most of us are familiar with Shakespeare because we've taken part in the All Ireland Inter-School Shakespeare Drama Competition, right? And that was our first introduction to both Shakespeare and theatre. So I also know that Shakespeare texts are done by all students who do literature, be it a local syllabus or be it the London syllabus. So I feel like this is a nice safe ground that all of us can relate to. So now when you're reading a text in class, if you're reading Shakespeare in class, you're going to think about the text in terms of the writer's construct. Now, talking about a writer's construct is also something I'd like to kind of touch on later. But let's think about how Shakespeare has created this text and how Shakespeare is presenting this text to us. Now, for those of you who don't know, these plays aren't, the idea of this play, the storyline, the plot of a Shakespeare play is not original. The guy didn't come up with that much, right? He has, you know, picked up on historical stories like the plenty of Richard III, I mean all the versions of the historical plays that he's written. Or if you've watched Shakespeare in Love, you know, there's a suggestion there that he steals the story of some other writers that he's having a conversation with in a bar. So the story is not original. The story is something he picked off, right? He plagiarized the story. But the text, what he's written, that's all attributed to him, right? So this is how Shakespeare makes a living. He hears a plot line, he hears of a story, maybe gossip, whatever, and then he starts writing it, right? Yeah, Azara, he has the same themes literally everywhere. So now this is the beauty of Shakespeare's text. The beauty of Shakespeare's text is that it's so original, it's so emotive, and you know, he just puts some really nice thoughts into kind of like this existing story, right? And when we study Shakespeare as a student, we look for the literary devices. We look for the metaphors, the similes. We look for the recurring motifs of clothing in Macbeth, or the dark versus light imagery in Othello. We'll appreciate the complexities of Hamlet's soliloquies, and we'll appreciate that problem play like Measure for Measure exists, and we'll appreciate the epic, tragic proportions of something like King Lear, right? So we look at the verse, we look at the trochaic meter of the Witches, we look at all of these things, and we'd be like, wow, you know, this guy, he's put some solid effort into creating this play, into constructing this play. And I mean, so much so that we even have Shakespeare dividing society by class using kind of like the language that he writes, right? If I've taught you, you must have heard me say verse for the wealthy and prose for the poor. So that's what Shakespeare does. He literally uses his text to separate by class. So anyway, if you're reading the text in a class, you will read it and you'll be like, oh wow, this man writes beautifully. Look at the meter, look at the rhythm, look at the you know, all of that, right? But you don't think about it in performance, because when you have a book in front of you, you don't think about it in terms of how it's going to be performed. And that's a bloody crime, right? Because you don't think about how Lady Macbeth, this tiny, petite little woman, is going to stand alone on this stage and kind of literally asks these spirits to come and unsex her here. You're not going to think about the practicalities of, you know, Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream having to fall in love with this man who's wearing a donkey's head, and how absolutely absurd that looks on stage, right? You're not going to think about that because you're kind of, you know, in Sinhala we say ebbehi vela, so you've kind of really kind of delved into this text. But this is where we part ways, because when you do this text, the same text in performance, you're not going to look at any of these things, right? And I think personally that that's a crime. I think that both what shall we say, both situations need to learn from each other. I think that when Shakespeare is taught, the performance of Shakespeare needs to be taught. We need to appreciate Shakespeare in performance, and when we perform, we need to study the text. Right now, again, let me use the example of the Shakespeare drama competition, right? If you go for the Shakespeare drama competition and you sit in the audience and you watch, you will hear many an actor on stage speaking in what can only be termed as something that sounds like poetry, da 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 da. It is a monotone. It is something predictable. It's something that we won't even listen to the words, because it's being told in the same way over and over again, right? That it loses its appeal to us. Now, this is not the fault of the actor. It's not the fault of the director. This is how Shakespeare wrote it. Shakespeare wrote his plays in meter, with rhyme, with rhythm, right? So it's really not, it's not the actor's fault. However, if you also find yourself at the Shakespeare drama competition, you will find schools and actors who have been directed by fantastic directors who don't use the meter. And let me tell you, as someone who has had the honor of being directed by some of these fantastic people, that not sticking to what the text is telling you to do in terms of reading it out and literally breaking away from that rhythm and meter is one of the hardest things that you can do. And I have immense respect for all the children who take part in any play that is written by Shakespeare, any performance by Shakespeare, where you literally move away from the meter and you start performing these lines as if they were regular speech, like we're talking now. That is a difficult feat, right? But we don't teach this in class, right? So this is my issue, right? This is something that I would like, to draw attention to in terms of, changing education, changing theater, that there should be a more holistic kind of involvement, right? Since perhaps some of you have not watched the Shakespeare drama competition, think about this in this way, right? When you watch a movie for the first time, and you don't have the subtitles on, you don't understand every single word that the actors are saying, right? Your gaps, you probably hear only about 80% of what they're saying. So the gaps are filled by the soundtrack, they're filled by the setting, they're filled by, if you're watching this, if you're watching a play, it's filled by the effects, the smoke machines, the lights, all of that, right? So it's that entire experience that is going to lend to your opinion of what you've seen on stage or on the screen, If you've not got subtitles, you don't know what they're talking about 100% of the time. So you rely on what we call an affective experience then, right? And that's what I mean. And that affective experience that you will see if you watch any performance, theater, film, that affective experience is not there when you study the text, right? So this is one of the biggest kind of issues that I have, right? Now, another thing that I would like to really talk about in terms of reading versus performing and how we read texts is, especially where plays are concerned, because, you know, my experience is Azara likes to call me a theater practitioner, but okay, let's use that term. My experience as a theater practitioner is that when we have a director coming in, that makes a huge difference, right? So when we have a director coming in, I feel like directors are really undervalued people because they're really amazing. They have so much talent, so much vision, but they're not really given due credit, right? So let's take, for example, a few plays. Let's take, or playwrights. Let's take Tennessee Williams, if you've read anything by Tennessee Williams, or Bertolt Brecht, or Arthur Miller, or An Inspector Calls. I can't remember for the life of me who wrote Inspector Calls, but I know it's on a syllabus somewhere. So if you take any of these plays, slightly modern, or if you take Beckett's Waiting for Godot, if you take any of these plays, you will notice that the playwright has so many stage directions and extra details in italics, right? So many. Now Shakespeare doesn't, but we'll get to that later. But writers like Tennessee Williams, Miller, all of these people, they have so many stage directions. Now, if I were to ask someone in one of my classes, like, guys, why do you think, why do you think the playwright has added so many details? I mean, they'd obviously be like, oh, miss, this is super useful to us because, we can help visualize what this looks like, right? We can help visualize what this is on stage, and we have a kind of nice idea of where this is. So it's really helpful to a student. But to a director, having so much stage directions is literally having the playwright coming from the grave and kind of curtailing your creative process 100%. Why? Because you have to stick to so many instructions, and you want a couch placed here, and you want something else perpendicular to a bed, and you want all of these things. I worked with a fabulous director a couple of months ago, and we were trying to put this play on, and I remember sitting with her and trying to lay out the stage according to what the playwright wanted us to do, and it's so difficult, right? It's so difficult. So I mean, I want you to understand that playwrights include so many details because it's a part of their meaning making process. It's all a part of this idea that this text is a construct, and that's my third point, so my fourth point, so hang on to that. I'll come to the whole idea of a text as a construct, but it's all kind of added in to help with the overall meaning that this playwright wants us to have at the end of the play. Now, if you're reading a play, it's fine, it's fantastic. Yes, I know that there are 6 chairs and there's 8 actors, and they're sitting on those chairs at some point, or this one is going in from stage left, that one is coming in from stage right. Oh, it makes perfect sense to me in my head, but you try to put that on stage and it becomes very complicated. And so we have directors who take 2 ways. Either they choose to go the way of the playwright and follow these judiciously, or they completely deviate and they just do what they want to do with the text. This, I think, is brilliant because having a playwright who takes a text and makes it his or her own is amazing, and I have a mondo respect for theater practitioners who do the same, right? So Shakespeare's texts allow for this because Shakespeare doesn't have very many stage directions. That's not because Shakespeare was not anal about these things. That's because everybody at that time wasn't putting any any stage directions, so the bugger didn't put any directions, right? So, you know, Shakespeare can be performed in multitudinous ways, and you just have to watch any of the score of movies that have been produced of Shakespeare to see the different interpretations that you can have of a Shakespeare text. So my issue here is that when we have a play that is being put on stage, we forget about the role of the director. And I think that's something that needs some attention too, because, you know, you can't copyright a director's production of a particular performance. So if someone puts on a stage play of, I don't know, Streetcar Named Desire, and someone else watches it on YouTube and decides, okay, I'm going to use the same way that this person laid out their stage and do it. And if I'm the one who thought about it first, I have no claim to that. So that's again something that I feel like playwrights and directors and theatre communities need to address. I know that workshopping happens, and that kind of helps really in getting all of your actors involved. But I really think that the director's role needs to be thought of. Now, copycat directors are sometimes necessary for certain productions, like if you take Les Miserables or Phantom of the Opera or even Hamilton. I mean, these kinds of productions exist because there is a set choreography that works with the play, the music and everything, and there's also a series of agreements that exist between the director, the choreographer, the writer and the entire troupe of actors. So for things like that, we have had you know, productions in Sri Lanka where, you know, the exact same version that you see on Broadway, albeit on a larger stage and with a larger audience and with greater you know, lights and sounds and whatever, albeit all of that has been done here, and that's okay because that's how it's supposed to be performed. But if you take a conventional script, performing it is very difficult for a director, because that director's intellectual property right, for lack of a better word, is not taken into account. So that's another issue that I see in terms of you know, when we read a text or when we learn a text. So my solution to this is basically that I have none, but kind of growing a real how can we say, we need to grow a practice where we are appreciative of kind of like the intellectual property of directors as well. And I know that it's happening, but I don't think it's happening fast enough. So in terms of a student, and in terms of if you're studying a play and you want to look at different interpretations of plays, YouTube is a fantastic rabbit hole. Stop watching videos of cats on YouTube and watch past productions of, you know, plays, so that you can see how these things are performed, and then you have a really good idea. And let me tell you, if you are a student and if you're writing for any of these public exams, I've had a tried and tested way where, you know, I told students, watch performances and comment on that dramaturgy of that production in your responses. And I think that student is here. This student got full marks for that response because he took the decision to write in that way. So it's not impossible. All right, Azara's got a question. How do you ensure one's vision in doing justice to the playwright's perspective? So that's where you have to part with the text, Azara. You have to decide, I am not going to listen to Tennessee Williams, who has written my text. Even though I'm in love with the play and I love the characters and everything, I'm going to go in a different direction. And that's a risk that you take, because Tennessee Williams has written this play, or whatever playwright, whoever, he has crafted this to create a specific effect. And if you decide to deviate from it, then you're allowing for multiple interpretations. I think that's fantastic. I think all texts should be performed without taking into account, you know, some dead guy in the whatever 1950s who wrote the play, because we have so many new interpretations and we have so many new experiences, and I think that a director should have the right to do it, because you do pay to perform your script, and you don't sign a contract to perform it in a particular way. So you have that bit of leeway when you do that. All right. So another thing that I really want to think about when you are doing reading or performing, or when you're thinking of doing these things for theatre, is that you take into account, yes, I think the author, but that's up to you, Azara. The author is dead if you want to go in that direction, right? So that's my next point. I'm looking at reader response theory, right? For those of you who are students of literature, maybe I've spoken to you about this before. What is reader response theory? So if you are reading a text, and that is where a lot of critical theory right now is moving to, we move towards reader response theory. We look at how a reader responds to a text. So if I am a reader and I'm thinking of performing this text, or I'm reading this text, I'm going to look at how this text affects me. So in terms of me, woman in my 30s, I have 2 kids, I teach, and I have a multitude, I'm a theatre practitioner. In that kind of little bubble, how does this text, how do I see this text? And this is why I love, discussions as methods of teaching, because I learn so much when I, use reader response theories with my students, or with any kind of discussion, because it allows for a multitude of experiences. Guys, you have to remember, we're all different people. We come from different backgrounds. We've got different experiences, different religions, so many different things. So, I mean, it's important that we look at different interpretations, and this is why, like I said before, I love directors who go beyond their comfort zone and they experiment with the text, because it's new, it's fresh, and it's, yes, there is no 100% new idea in the world, but always a different perspective of something that's been looked at repeatedly through the same lens is always lovely. I also love students who come up with very random but extremely plausible kind of theories when they write also, because I think that's critical thinking, right? And that is your reader response, and then through that reader response theory you can look at a text in so many different ways. So the crux of what I'm trying to say through my third point is that there's no correct way to read a text, but we need to allow ourselves an opportunity to read these texts in multiple ways, because that's the only way we're going to learn. Otherwise we're going to be like frogs in a well or stuck in an echo chamber, and we need to be open to the idea as kind of educators, theatre practitioners, as actors, as adults, to just be open to kind of looking at things in multiple perspectives. It's called looking at it telescopically, not microscopically, and it's a fantastic kind of principle if you want to kind of be open to different interpretations of texts. I'm not talking politics or anything, just texts. So the last thing I want to touch on is the whole idea of a construct, right? And this is the most important thing for a student of literature, is that you accept the fact that your text is a construct. And I think it is so central that we, as kind of performance artists and people who are involved in theatre, we accept this too. We accept that this play or this text is a construct. It has been crafted by someone with a very specific idea in mind, right? If you take any of George, I forgot his name, the guy who wrote Animal Farm, that guy, he wrote 1981, he wrote Big Brother. George Orwell, I think he's called. I apologize, it's just a complete brain fart here. If you take his text, you'll understand that it is a construct. It is a very harsh criticism on a particular political ideology and a particular way that things are. Thank you, George Orwell, I was right. Right, so Shakespeare, anybody, from the smallest text, from the performance artists that we see on the road to the painters on Green Path, all of these people have a very specific goal when they construct that text, right? And we need to be aware of it, because that's the only way we're going to learn. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of fall into that rabbit hole and just be like, oh wow, this is just beautiful. this is just lovely, and then we're not going to learn anything out of it. So the moment we are able to take a step back and to acknowledge, oh my God, this guy has made this in a particular way, it's been constructed in a particular way so that I have XYZ responses to it, that's when we hit that sweet spot. That's when we are able to either read the text or perform the text, because we become more aware of the text as a construct, right? And that kind of increases our awareness of everything. So we need to look at, I've written down this example of clickbait, and I've said, you know, clickbait has a very particular focus. Clickbait is a construct. Content creators create content for a particular purpose. So it's all constructed, right? So we need to acknowledge the constructed nature of it. Nobody just sat down, George Lucas didn't sit down and decide to make Star Wars, you know, out of the blue just because he was bored. There is a particular message that he's trying to tell us. The MCU is all about giving us particular messages. So we need to be able to watch these texts and identify what is the message that we are being told. I don't think we should disregard any text as, oh, it's a play, or it's a movie, or it's a book. You know, art is so meaningful and has so many layers and levels of meanings. And the moment we acknowledge that it is a construct is when, you know, it's going to be easier for us to identify it. And the moment we start acknowledging, okay, these are the building blocks that a writer has used to create a particular effect. So dialogue, metaphors, similes, or your annoying stage directions by the writer, all of it, right? Another example, a great example is, I don't know how many of you have read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. It is a novel that has been adapted into a play very successfully. It's gone on tour. And there are some really lovely versions of it online. So if you don't know about the book, it is about a boy called Christopher who's on the autistic spectrum, who sees himself as a Sherlock Holmes and tries to solve the crime of the dog who was killed in the nighttime. And it's so beautiful that this text as a novel has some very specific effects that it wants, messages that it wants to convey, and the author uses some very specific effects in order to convey this. However, in the play, the play adaptation of this text is completely different. The writer of the play, the man who adapted the play, uses some uses multiple means to kind of create that same environment that the novel author has in the book, but in a completely different way, and it's just mind-blowing. So this is what I'm saying. The moment you understand the construct, the moment you realize, okay, this guy wrote this book because he wants XYZ effect, is the moment you're going to realize, okay, I'm going to switch the medium, but I'm going to use different methods that are specific to this art form, and I'm going to produce it in a different way, but I'm still going to get the XYZ effect. Then you're solid, you're gold, right? So again, it's about, you know, looking at different mediums, looking at different ways to create the same impact, or completely go haywire and create a different impact. So it is about the affective experience of the text. If you want the same experience from the text that was intended from it, then you need to put yourself out of the box. You need to acknowledge that a text needs to be performed, and that a text can be performed. I mean, if you take poetry, poetry is all about rhyme, rhythm, or lack of rhyme, rhythm. You can't understand a poem unless you read it out loud. And when you read it out loud, the emotion, the tone, and the way that it's written, it all just comes together. So, I mean, poetry is also a text that needs to be performed to enhance our understanding of it. And once we are able to understand that, then we will understand that there is really no difference between reading and studying a text and performing a text, because that was the goal with which the text was created. So we must not separate the two. So to summarize, basically I've told you that writers construct their texts, and these constructs have different implications based on the mediums they are presented in, or they can have the same implication, right? But the key is to understanding that it is a construct. And the moment you are able to identify that this is something that has been created with a very specific purpose in mind, then you're halfway there. Because once you identify the purpose, then it's just a matter of taking another step back and say, oh, okay, this guy has used ABC to make this effect, and you know, whatever. So that's key. Accept that a text is a construct. Anything you watch, anything you're exposed to is constructed. It's there for a particular purpose. Identify that purpose, and then you're halfway there to learning it, to studying it, or just being mature about life. Basically, that works too. Another thing I brought out is directors are underappreciated for their vision because their product is intangible. So they can't stop anyone else from mimicking their version of a play or a performance or anything like that. And I think we really need to, as a community of artists, theater practitioners, theater, writers, anybody, actors, really kind of come up with ways to appreciate directors who are also artists, and I think who are extremely visionary in kind of choosing to produce plays in the different ways that they do produce plays. And we need to also allow ourselves to be open to different interpretations and different opinions. Otherwise, there is no learning. And what is the point of life if there is no learning? And also, we must be open to, allowing a text to go from medium to medium, because that is the longevity of a text. If it has the ability to adapt. Shakespeare has lasted for so long. I mean, here we are a tiny country in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and we have a drama competition that's existed for eons and has spawned so many of our theatrical talent has come from that. And I don't think that's something Shakespeare ever intended to. But when we allowed the text to come out of that medium of being the complete works of Shakespeare, and we put it into a medium of a competition, of performance, of teenagers who are directed by former actors and actresses of this same said competition. I mean, we've created a lovely word for it is habitus. We've created a nice little a bubble that exists, and that's how that text has ensured its longevity, because it's passed and it's transcended mediums to become that, right? So I mean, it's just about accepting that and being okay to that. So Azara, to answer your question, is it okay to ignore the playwright's stage directions? I think yes, because I think the playwright would want his work to be remembered for time immemorial or whatever. And so if it has to exist, then it has to transcend that medium. It has to change, it has to adapt. Even though a play is kind of static, we can look at the different ways that these mediums change. I mean, if you take Witcher as a franchise, it started off as a novel, then it became a wildly successful video game. Now it's on Netflix and we all oogle Henry Cavill's amazing body. And now there's an anime series that's coming out too. I mean, so look at the amount of mediums that text itself has transcended. That means that, you don't limit it to just reading it or just performing it. And that's kind of, the name of the game. So I think the more we what do we say? Sorry, a friend of mine has corrected me. A collection of short stories, actually. Thank you, Aska. But the more we kind of allow these mediums to expand, that's where the future is at. So intertextuality is key. Palimpsestic texts like onions, which we can peel, that's also key. But an interesting fact that I realized recently is that the word text, it actually means web. It comes from the Latin root of the word web. So a text is a web. It's a web of meanings. and we need to allow a text to exist, to not be static, but to exist as something we read, as something we perform, and kind of appreciate the text in all of that essence. All right, that concludes what I've planned to say. I've been asked to kind of open up to questions. So if you've got any questions about what I've asked, or what I've talked about rather, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask me, please go ahead. I hope you've enjoyed what I've talked about. It's based on years of reading and studying and teaching and learning. You're most welcome, Azara. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to kind of do this. I thought I was a little too old for an Instagram live session. But clearly I've done it, so yeah, yes, please ask questions. You have a question. Any tips for young actors, actresses who might not know that they're still reading the lines they perform? Oh wow, thanks for that, Mayan. I think again, if you've got an actor or actress who is looking at a text, it's I think it would be nice if you could lead the horse to water and tell him or her that this text is a construct, and to understand this is what it's been constructed for, and these are the goals of it. And the moment that the actor understands the constructed nature of a text is when she or he can also kind of engage with the text a little bit more. It's not easy to kind of unlearn or deconstruct like that, but you know, you need to lead the horse to water and expose the actor to the possibility of the constructed nature and the possibility of playing something completely different or completely intended. How do you decide on your casting process? Oh God, thank you for that, Azara. How do I decide on my casting process? I don't know. I don't think I have a process. Last time I produced a play, I decided to leave the text there, and I heavily edited it, and I introduced new mediums to it, and I decided to cast the male roles, the very dominant, aggressive male roles, as females, because my goal in doing that as a director was to have people think about the possibility that a woman can be aggressive, and a woman can be a bully, and a woman can hurt another person, because social constructs dictate that women perhaps don't have it in them to you know, to do things like that. But I disagree. I have met many women in my life who can be cruel, who can be mean. I can be cruel, I can be mean, and you know, I just would like to I just wanted people to entertain that possibility. So yes, Martin McDonough had a different aim for his play, but I was the director. It was my artistic call, and I decided to take a call as that. And I think from what I heard, it was pretty good. It was a good decision, and it was a journey. It was an artistic journey. I mean, what is the point of an experience if it's not going to teach you something, right? That's kind of like my thing. So it's all about learning. So I learned a lot from that experience, and I'm glad I did it. And hopefully soon we can go back to the theater, and we can perform some, you know, unconventional pieces, and, you know, get people to think outside the box. Anything else? Any other questions? You're most welcome. No more questions. Right, lots of emojis. Thank you. Thank you for the many emojis. I appreciate it. All right. So since I don't think we've got any questions, I'm supposed to, okay. Since I don't think we've got any more questions, I think I'll call it a day. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for, giving us your time, and, thank you so much to Azara and everybody at ARTRA. Oh, there we go. Teaching a text without performance. Sorry, I missed that question. I apologize. So you teach a how do you teach a text without a performance aspect? I think most texts are performative. I think even the texts that we don't think are performative are performative. Anything can be performed. So even if it's a novel, it can be performed. Experience. So that's what you have. You have workshop sessions, right? If you want to have, memoirs are performed, blogs are performed, any text can be performed. Again, it's about allowing that text to transcend its original medium if you want to think about how it can be performed. And I think, again, it's about unlearning that idea so that you have, a kind of idea. But how would you teach it? How would you teach something that can't be performed? You set very clear boundaries. You say, this is something that can't be performed. And so we have to do, we have to do with it we have to do what we can with it in that given framework. But that's what I think about a text that can't be performed. But I might have to disagree with you on the fact that there is a text that can't be performed, because I believe that most, if not all, texts can be performative. All right, any more questions? So many hearts. I'm really feeling the love. Thank you, guys. My mom is also here. Thank you, Mama. All right. So since we've not got anything else, thank you so much for your time, and I hope that I brought something of interest to your Friday evening, which is Friday the 13th also. Thank you so much, and take care. Bye. Okay, I have no idea how to end this.